Thanks for joining us here on Seahawks Today. Tyler Jones here with you. Appreciate you joining us. We have the latest on the Seattle Seahawks coaching search as we now have a full list of names that the Seahawks have put in requests to interview to fill the position left by Pete Carroll. We'll go over those, give you some thoughts and how realistic some of these candidates are coming up in just a matter of moments. Before we do, a little survey of the 12s out there today. I want to know, how long have you been a fan of the Seattle Seahawks? Have you been a fan for a year, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years? Just a little survey. Let me know how long you've been a fan. Show some love for your favorite team. Chime in the comment section and let us know. Let's begin with this quote from Matt Hasselbeck, the former Seahawks quarterback. Did an interview with Seattle Sports Radio and talked about what he was looking for in the next Seattle Seahawks head coach and said the following. To me, the head coaching job, where it gets special, is who's setting the culture. What's the DNA of our program? How do we talk in the building? What are our non-negotiables? What are we hanging our hat on? That culture setter, that vision setter, that's your head coach. Hasselbeck would then go on to say that the Seahawks need to go hire a leader of men. Now, I'll say this in response to what Hasselbeck is saying. I get what he's going for, and culture and all that sounds nice. Pete Carroll had a great culture and all that. That wasn't the issue culture-wise. The number one thing I'm looking for, compared to Matt Hasselbeck, I'm not necessarily looking for a culture guy. I'm looking for a winner. I want to win football games. Sorry, Matt, that should be the priority. When John Schneider and Jody Allen are looking for that next head coach, that's what I want to look for, is who is going to make winning the priority. Culture and all that stuff is secondary. Winning, that's what begins your culture as far as I'm concerned. Now, when I look at the candidate pool, I'm not overly impressed, to be honest, of the names that have come up here. And we'll show you these names here in just a bit. And it almost seems like that John Schneider is rigging this thing for Dan Quinn to clearly be the best candidate by not necessarily going after all the best candidates he could possibly choose from in all this. It's as if they're doing a solid for Dan Quinn to try to justify giving him this head coaching job. Three things you need to know. The Seahawks are in position with the candidates that they have found to meet the Rooney Rule guidelines, assuming that they get the in-person interviews out of the request that they've made. If they do two of those, then they'll meet that requirement. Now, we told you a couple days ago that Mike McDonald, according to a report from NFL Network's Ian Rappaport, is expected to get an interview request from Seattle. That's still the expectation, but as of right now, there's no official request that's been placed. That could change, but at the moment, there's no official request just yet, and I would expect that to eventually change. Of the 8 candidates that we have on our list of the Seahawks putting in requests for, 2 of them are currently an assistant coach on a playoff team that's still in the postseason at this point in time, and I think that's a very important note because that factors in of when you can talk to these guys or not. Let's go over the list. Let's start with Ben Johnson. News coming out today that the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator has been requested by the Seattle Seahawks for an interview. And I got to say, I'm very impressed with Ben Johnson. He's one of the candidates on this list, one of the few that I actually like. And to be honest, of all the offensive minds out there, the young offensive minds, everybody's trying to look for the next Sean McVay, right? He's the best one out there of potential targets if you want to go that end of things. And he's catching a lot of attention everywhere. He's got interview requests with Washington, Carolina, the Chargers, Tennessee, and Atlanta, and now Seattle. That's 6 different teams so far, and there might even be more later. Ben Johnson, he's going to be a head coach somewhere. It's just a matter of who ultimately ends up hiring him. Should the Seahawks hire Ben Johnson or not? It's our pinned comment today. Weigh in the comment section. Tell me what you think. Y for yes, in for no, if you believe Ben Johnson should be the next head coach for your Seattle Seahawks. Let's tell you about today's sponsor. That is Factor. Factor Meals. A bachelor like me is going to be doing pretty good with Factor Meals. It's healthy and it's very easy to make, folks. Get started on your resolutions with Factor so you're ready for the new year. Factor's ready to eat. Meal delivery takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success in the new year. Skip the grocery stores, prep work, and cooking fatigue. Instead, get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door with over 35 meals to choose from per week, including options like keto, calorie smart, vegan, plus veggie, and more. Plus, over 55 weekly add-ons. You'll have a ton of nutritious and flavorful options to kickstart your resolutions. Forget frantic lunch preps and rush dinners. Factor's 2-minute meals are your secret weapon of the new year. Fuel it fast with restaurant-quality meals, all delivered right to your door. When things get hectic, Factor is flexible. Change your order up every week with plans from 4 to 18 meals per week, or pause or reschedule your deliveries anytime. Head to factormeals.com/SeahawksChat50 and use code SeahawksChat50 to get 50% off. That's code SeahawksChat50. Get factormeals.com/SeahawksChat50 to get 50% off. The link is in the comments and description of today's video. Factor Meals. Good. All right, next on our list, Dan Quinn. You guys knew that was going to happen. That was the very first name the Seahawks were going to call, the defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, who have been eliminated from the postseason after the loss to the Green Bay Packers. And a lot of you right away are going to say, look at Dan Quinn and be like, I don't know if I want that guy after the debacle the Cowboys went through over the weekend. I'll say this, with Dak's turnovers he had, that was going to make it a tough day for that defense. They had their work cut out for them. Defense still didn't look great, don't get me wrong, but I give the benefit of the doubt of some sorts that they didn't get the help they needed from their offense. With that said, Dan Quinn is still the odds-on favorite, and by a lot. If there was a Vegas line on this, and I'm sure there is, I mean, this would be way up there for Dan Quinn's odds, just because the connections, the history with the Seahawks, and everything. He is in the driver's seat to get this job. And you look at the teams that are also interested in Dan Quinn, there's a very good chance that he'll be a head coach. If it's not Seattle, it's somewhere else. And it could be a situation where Seattle might be in a bidding war to get him because of the other teams that are also interested in Dan Quinn, which include Carolina, Tennessee, Washington, and the LA Chargers. That's now 5 teams interested in Dan Quinn at this point. Next on the list, Evero from the Carolina Panthers, their defensive coordinator. And this is somebody that I like as a DC. I think that Carolina Panthers defense way overachieved this year, especially considering how bad that offense was. The defense really carried that team. He did a better job than what their record indicates. But let's be frank, he's got no chance at being the head coach as far as it goes for the Seahawks, or really any team for that matter. I think this is a situation where the Seahawks are getting him on the phone and trying to establish that relationship, and then potentially circling back to make him the DC. He'll be a name to watch out for that job. He's got interviews with Carolina and Atlanta, but I think both those teams are in pretty similar situations when it comes to hiring Evero, of making him their defensive coordinator, in Carolina's case, doing him a solid of keeping him around. The next name on this list, Raheem Morris, the current defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams, was a head coach in the NFL previously, now looking to get his second chance, and got to give credit to Raheem Morris. He's done a really good job with the LA Rams defense over the last few years. And I think right now, of the coaches that we know that there's been an official request for, Morris is probably the third choice for this Seahawks team at this point of those names that we know of. And Morris has interviews with Carolina, with Washington. I think when you look back at the first time that he was a head coach, he didn't necessarily get a fair shake, wasn't put into a situation to succeed necessarily. So that would be the silver lining of sorts if you're Raheem Morris when it comes to this next job. But he's not the guy I would choose. And I got to say, when I look at this candidate list of the names that Seattle is leaving out that they haven't tried to reach out to yet, it makes me kind of nervous. And that leads us to our next question. Do you trust John Schneider to hire the right coach? He's never led a coaching search before. He is the guy. He's calling the shots for Seattle. This is his organization now. Do you trust him to get the job done? Let me know what you think. T for trust, D for don't. Chime in the comments section. Folks, trying to reach our next milestone of 48.5 5,000 subscribers here on Seahawks Today, and we're less than 30 away from reaching that next benchmark. We are your offseason headquarters here on Seahawks Today. We're talking about this coaching search every damn day until a coach is hired. We're talking trades, free agency, draft, and more. We're going to be all over it. Lock us in right now. Subscribe now for free. We got you covered like no one else does each and every day here on Seahawks Today. Now, we turn our attention to Miami. Frank Smith, the Miami Dolphins offensive coordinator, also got a request for a coaching interview. And you may be asking yourself, like me, who the hell is Frank Smith? Because he is not a household name by any means. This one is a bit of a reach of sorts. And this might be a situation where, kind of like with Evero, where you're trying to establish a relationship to maybe find an OC here, because Smith doesn't call plays in Miami. That job belongs to Mike McDaniel. So I don't think Smith is going to have the credence to be a head coach, but you might be able to tempt him for the next head coach with that relationship established to come to Seattle and be the OC and get the opportunity to call plays, something he doesn't get to do in Miami. No other team has put in an interview request for Frank Smith. Not saying he's not done a good job there, but we just don't know a ton about him because he's not the play caller, not the one calling the shots. But the Miami offense, to their credit, has been very good the last couple of seasons. Mike Kafka of the New York Football Giants next on the list, the OC there in New York, former quarterbacks coach in Kansas City, worked with Patrick Mahomes and had a good first year with New York. And last year was just a complete disaster for that New York Giants team. And they took huge steps back. I think he would be just an awful hire, if we're going to be frank with you. I don't even know if I would want Mike Kafka to be my OC after the debacle we witnessed this past year with that New York Giants offense. And, we heard from that coaching staff, from Dable and Kafka, they were all in. They believed in Daniel Jones, and it bit them in the ass this year with the results that showed for it. He's getting requests from Tennessee, but that's it at this point. I would be surprised if Kafka ends up a head coach in this hiring cycle at this point. Who should be the next head coach of your Seattle Seahawks? Your turn to make the call here on Seahawks Today. Give me one name. Who's the guy you want to be the next head coach for Seattle? Let us know in the comments section. Next on the list is Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator for the Las Vegas Raiders. And I'll say this. You can count me a little bit skeptical when you bring up a name from a coaching staff where the head coach got fired mid-season. Granted, I'll say that Patrick Graham actually is a pretty good coach. And we saw that the Raiders finished the season much stronger than they did early on the season. But why Patrick Graham? Why are we having this discussion here? Like, this Seahawks job is one of, if not the very best jobs available. And we're wasting our time with Patrick Graham. I mean, Jim Harbaugh? Anybody? Hello? Like, what are we doing here, folks? Why are we wasting our time with Patrick Graham? Now, he is getting an interview with the LA Chargers. He'll have discussions with that organization. We'll see what goes on there. But that's the only other team that has showed interest in Patrick Graham at this point is the LA Chargers. Maybe another name to potentially watch for a DC role. But head coach, that one I don't know where Schneider's going with. Last on the list, this guy's a bit of a rising star. Done a really good job, especially as of late. Bobby Slowik, the Houston Texans offensive coordinator, very impressive. And we've seen this Houston Texans offense, especially in the second half of this year, really come along with the development of C.J. Stroud, how terrific that offense has been. They got a divisional round playoff game coming up this week against the Baltimore Ravens. The offense took on one of the best defenses in football in the Cleveland Browns last week and looked great. Slowik is gaining traction with teams like Atlanta, Carolina, Tennessee, just to name a few. Slowik is interesting. He's kind of a wild card in all this and gaining momentum as this goes further along with the surprising success of the Houston Texans. Appreciate you joining us here on this edition of Seahawks Today. If you made it to the end of today's video, we appreciate you. Spam real one. You're a real one in the chat. if you made it to the end of today's show. We'll see you next time right here on Seahawks Today.